what do you do if you're in church and you're confronted with violence?
Nowhere under the law, and this comes from the First Amendment, the right to assembly, nowhere under the law is there the right to go into private places. If you think about it, if suddenly you can just go into private places and protest, every concert, every restaurant, everything would be completely destroyed. The free market would be destroyed.
This isn't just a matter of abusing the church. It's part of a political strategy to provoke an equal and opposite response.
He makes it very clear. Would you donate money so I can buy guns and bombs to kill the AIDS agents? And he raises $200 in a matter of 30 minutes.
I'm not even sure what a sacrosanct place on the left would look like, unless unless it's a kind of
a crystal shop.
You know? A lesbian dining club, perhaps. I have no idea. I can't think.
Yeah, I think anybody who watches the left or the right, you don't need to know. If you just see a photo or 10 seconds of an image, you know which side is which.
Yeah. Justin, what do you think about the proposal that actually the progressives, the revolutionary, the anarchists are working up to provoke a civil war in America, a new civil war between the red states and the blue states?
The left side, or whatever we want to term it, is more and more tearing things down. The woke ideology is built upon tearing down the present structure. That's built in upon their ideology. They'll be the first to admit it.
The Spanish Civil War began because the progressives of the left began to attack the Catholic Church in Spain.
Well, I always had problems with the Spanish Civil War, meaning I was a big Hemingway fan, and I loved.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
I loved For Whom the Bell Tolls. That was one of my favorite novels.
The left make it their business, first of all, to stop women becoming mothers, to destroy motherhood.
I don't know if you've heard this, but in the United States, we have an anagram called DINK, D-I-N-K, and this stands for Dual Income, No Kids.
Oh, and yes. Yes.
And it's even a new one that came up called Dink Wad. It's dual income, no kids, with a dog. And, hello, everybody. This is Justin from Reclaiming Christendom.
I'm Gavin, also from Reclaiming Christendom.
Probably in warmer weather than I am here in New York. It's been freezing and snowing. How about over there on your side of the pond?
No, it's been freezing and snowing and storming. We're having West Atlantic gales, which come from you, so you no longer have them. I should say, I think they happen in mid-Atlantic, but my boiler has just blown up because it lives under some French stone stairs, and the combination of the melting snow and the storm means that lots of amounts of water have entered my boiler's electrics, and it's an unhappy pairing.
That doesn't sound nice. I know from experience boilers are expensive things, so that does not sound pleasant.
10 to 12,000. That's very expensive.
12,000, yes, just to keep warm. Well, speaking of keeping warm and to make a nice little transition, it's very cold in Minnesota these days. I'm sure you've heard about that.
I have heard it's very cold in Minnesota, yes.
And really what's been dominating the news out here, well, there's several things, so I wouldn't say one. But what's been going on with the ICE agents and the protests, if you call them that, up in Minnesota has been dominating the airwaves. And I think it's really, really something that we should discuss because a lot of issues are coming up with it.
So one of the ways in which it's been described is that some anti-ICE activists discovered that somebody, we'll call him David Edwards, I'm not sure if that's his real name, I think it might be, but there was a David Edwards who was both a part-time pastor and an administrator in ICE. So they tracked him down to this church, and they decided that it was the same man, though it might not have been, and they entered into divine worship and began to scream and shout and offer those very attractive slogans, as in hands up, don't shoot, whilst people were trying to sing hymns, pray to God, receive the Holy Eucharist, and offer divine worship. And I've always wondered if I was in church whether I would stoop to violence or not. I think I would. I've been in a couple of services in France where a strange man, not indigenous to France, has come in wearing a knapsack. And I've then set myself within leaping distance of the priest, just in case this man who's non-indigenous with a knapsack should have come in for reasons nefarious. And one of the reasons for doing that is that about 25 minutes from where I am, a few years ago, Father Jacques Hamel, an 85-year-old priest, was celebrating Mass, and two men of non-France origin came in and they cut his head off. So it was not very far away from here. I hope it doesn't happen again. But there's a sense that what do you do if you're in church and you're confronted with violence? And I think ethically, I think every church should have 6 strong men whose job it is to repel anybody coming in committing blasphemy. You don't have to beat them up or attack them or punch them, but you have to expel them and make it worth their while not to come in again. So this is a new departure, I think, for churches in the West, and other people may disagree with that. But meanwhile, since there were no strong men who were willing to do that, or not enough men, the church was taken over. And there are 2 interesting things about this I hope we'll discuss. One is it's really crossing a line when churches get held hostage by left-wing activists. It's only the left that does this. There's no equivalent or symmetrical protest on the right that attempts. And so one of the things we should also talk about is the lack of symmetry between conserving and progressive politics. And the other is my interest in the Spanish Civil War, because this was exactly how the Spanish Civil War started. And so 1 or 2 other commentators have made the point that there is a tipping point, and there is precedence for it, where the left initiates civil war, civil conflict, civil disturbance of a serious kind by attacking the churches. And this is not just a political act, this is a metaphysical act as well.
Well, yeah, I think the pastor you're talking about, David Eastwood, I think what's going on there is we have to distinguish between peaceful protests and riots and violence. And some people get confused about this. They think you can go protest anywhere. I know in Minnesota, you can protest without a license as long as it's in the sidewalk or a public forum. You don't need a license to do that. The only time you need a license is if it's in a park, if you're using amplified sound, doing something that might interfere with traffic. But nowhere under the law, and this comes from the First Amendment, the right to assembly, nowhere under the law is there the right to go into private places. If you think about it, if suddenly you can just go into private places and protest, every concert, every restaurant, everything would be completely destroyed. The free market would be destroyed. And they know that. So people are getting a bit confused here when they watch this. And what's ironic is the very liberal attorney general, the general there, his name is Ralph Ellison, is saying that this is okay. This is a clear violation. Protests are not allowed in private forums unless there's some special license granted. And this is a clear violation of that. So these are not protesters. These are breaking the law. And another thing is they're really rioters in that sense. There's many federal laws that protect houses of worship. I know there was an act called the FACE Act in 1994 that explicitly protected houses of worship from intimidation or violence. And if you watch the videos, and there's plenty of videos out there, that's what this is. There's a large, because you talk about would you resort to violence? Well, if you watch the video, it's not easy when a group of 20 plus people just come storming in. Where do you start? Whose head do you crack? What do you do? You know, so they come in screaming at the top of your lungs. In the video, you see parents with their young kids quickly getting out. When you have a group of that size, it's very different than when you have one guy with a knapsack. So, you know, I think what we have here is a clear violation of the law. We have rioters, you know, not protesters.
Well, I think trust a lawyer to make it clear and helpfully clear. Thank you. That's quite right. And of course, I was giving the example of a man with a knapsack as my own, the limits of my own experience. But you're quite right in saying that this is a different situation, and what we have here is a riot, illegally a riot. And would you engage in physical violence as a matter of self-defense? And so I was suggesting that with the one man you might. I'm not sure you would with 20 people. You're quite right, apart from the fact it may not be practical. But the other thing is that it was suggested that one of the reasons why the Attorney General in the state was going light on it was that this isn't just a matter of abusing the church. It's part of a political strategy to provoke an equal and opposite response from then what do you call it? The right, the establishment, the people you're protesting against, in order to escalate. And so, of course, there's a very good principle of non-escalation within Christian ethics. You turn the other cheek. So I have to say I'm ambivalent about the point. I always have been ambivalent about the circumstances in which you turn the other cheek. You absorb evil and you don't inflame it by pouring kerosene on the flames and retaliating. And other times when actually this is not evil that should be absorbed, it's evil that should be repulsed, because there are other factors that come into play. And I don't know which of those apply in the Minnesota church situation. I
agree. I agree. It's tough to, what it is it's tough to watch these type of things.
Yeah.
It's tough to see these families sitting there. There's babies, there's young kids, and these group of protesters come screaming at the top of their lungs. And part of you does feel like just, smacking them upside the head and kicking them from their bottom out the door. And that is a good reaction. And if you don't feel that natural reaction, I think something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? There's a video out right now. I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's a man who walks around. He did it for about half an hour to these protesters, these ICE protesters, and offers them if they donate money, he'll buy weapons to kill the ICE agents. And it's a true video. It's out there. And it's extraordinary because he's talking to these people. And in half an hour, he makes it very clear. Would you donate money so I can buy guns and bombs to kill the ICE agents? And he raises $200 in a matter of 30 minutes. And he has it all in footage, and all of them agree. And they actually donate money so he can kill. He didn't make it ambiguous. He says, if you give me the money, I'll buy the weapons, and we have to kill these people because this type of protesting is not working. Peaceful protesting is not working. And they agree, and they donate this money. So this tells you, on your point, a little bit about what type of protesters are we dealing with. This video was made to show that these are not regular protesters in Minnesota. I'm sure there are some of them, but a large percentage of them are extremely violent. And that's why when you watch the videos, there's something very disturbing about this. It's not like a hippie march saying, peace and love. This is something very different. These are rioters. There are riots. They're attacking cars. They're physically attacking people. They're storming churches. That's why this is fascinating, because it's turned a point now where really, if you want to use the right term, Minnesota is besieged by rioters.
Are these Antifa activists without the masks? It's the same kind of level of street violence. I don't think it matters. We don't need to know. But I wonder if they are the case. The thing that interests me a great deal is the lack of symmetry between the left and the right. You don't get people from the right of the political spectrum invading sacrosanct places on the left. In fact, I'm not even sure what a sacrosanct place on the left would look like, unless unless it's a kind of
a crystal shop,
a lesbian dining club, perhaps. I have no idea. I can't think. But so the reason that's important is because in a lot of commentary, people assume there's a kind of pari passive situation. There's a degree of symmetry. What they do, we can do back. But actually, what we've got is a group of people who are trying to take over and destroy society, and another group of people who are trying to preserve society. And the politics and the strategies of destruction are very different from the policies and the strategies of preservation. of course, one of the interesting things that the man who influenced Nick Fuentes says is that nothing is worth preserving anymore because the left have already taken over all the major institutions. They've taken over the law, medicine, health, university, sorry, medicine, health, same thing, and so on. So the problem for the conservationists or the conservatives is there's nothing you can preserve. It's all been taken.
Well, yeah, I think anybody who watches the left or the right, you don't need to know. If you just see a photo or 10 seconds of an image, you know which side is which.
Yeah.
The right protests, when the right march, I wouldn't even say march for something, they're usually orderly, organized, and they take great care to keep within the law generally. And generally, when you see the other side, it's completely chaotic. This is now, of course, there's exceptions to this, but in general, if you take an eye test, you can always tell which side is which. It's not very hard. There's things on the internet joking about this, and
of course, we shouldn't really call them the right and the left because then that suggests a degree of symmetry. I mean, it all began in France with the King of France, and the people on the king's right were those who wanted to conserve his position, and those on the left were the pre-revolutionaries who wanted reform. And that's where we get it from. And it's really a bit silly to take a vision of French politics in the mid 18th century and then say the labels will work for us today. I think we need to find different labels in order to describe the people doing it, so we can get closer to the truth of who they are and why they're doing things.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think when you see who's protesting out there, we have to get other terms, maybe centrist or the general population are just protesting these type of things. I think it's important to note that the Department of Justice also just subpoenaed Governor Tim Walz, the Attorney General. This mayor, boy, he's a real character. The mayor of Minneapolis. I don't know if you've heard of him. Jacob Fry is his name, and he just defends them no matter what. He doesn't, you would like to hear a politician at least take a bow and say, we want freedom of expression, but at the same time, let's make sure we stay within the law. That's not what they're saying. They have nothing of that nature. It's actually rather frightening. And all of them have been subpoenaed just, I think, yesterday or today.
Justin, what do you think about the proposal that actually the progressives, the revolutionary, the anarchists are working up to provoke a civil war in America, a new civil war between the red states and the blue states? I mean, the blue states are becoming increasingly bankrupt. Their taxes are very high. They're not very nice places to live. They're becoming increasingly dysfunctional. As I understand it, there's a certain flight to the right. People are going to take sanctuary in red states where they're not going to be arrested or hassled for what they think and they say. And that actually, ultimately, this is going to erupt into a kind of conflict, because a conflict which may be the progressives are trying to actually instigate in order to bring it to a head of some kind.
Well, I think that's very interesting. I've seen and listened to, there was a professor of war in England who's talked about the possibility of civil war. Do you know his name?
Yeah, his name's Betts, Professor Betts from King's College London.
Yeah, and I've listened to his lectures about what's going on in the UK and about the possibility of civil war. So, I mean, I wouldn't quickly say that it's a possibility, but it's certainly looking like that a little bit, like it's trending in that direction, meaning that the left side, or whatever we want to term it, is more and more tearing things down, rioting, destroying, storming buildings, blocking traffic, smashing windows, destroying cities. So there's no more peaceful protests. And if you think about their ideology, the woke ideology is built upon tearing down the present structure. That's built in upon their ideology. They'll be the first to admit it. So I think definitely they would like to do that. Their idea is to tear down all the institutions, because according to this woke ideology or this woke religion, all the institutions are biased and deleterious, and everything has to be ripped down. So I definitely think they are trending in that direction. Whether such an event is possible, I think we still have a long way to go before something like that's possible.
One of the things I'd like to talk about, only because I'm interested, and I think some of the people who listen to us may want to make contributions in the notes, is my surprising change of mind over the Spanish Civil War. So I take this direction because there was a commentator who said the Spanish Civil War began because the progressives of the left began to attack the Catholic Church in Spain, and they did it by lining up priests and nuns against the walls of churches and shooting them. They crucified nuns onto church doors. They dug up the corpses of nuns and mocked them. And there was a sudden, I would say it has to be metaphysical as well as political, bursting out from behind the lines of what you might call normative process. And it began what I think is the metaphysical, I think it's best described by the metaphysical map that Our Lady offered us in Fatima, and it's related to the vision of Pope Leo XIII, that the sins of Russia, which I take to be communism and utopian egalitarianism on earth, would, if we weren't careful, spread and destroy all every other society. And then, I mean, two things happened to justify Our Lady's warning. The first was that the Second World War happened. And it was very interesting that her analysis was that the Second World War effectively constituted a continuation of the First World War. Spiritually, she said that was what was taking place. And during my lifetime, it's been interesting to see historians catch up with that. Now, they don't know they're quoting Our Lady, but some of them have begun to say, actually, these weren't two separate. This wasn't World War I and World War II. This was a European World War in two parts. And the Second World War was a continuation of the first because it was unfinished. There was just a temporary gap of 21 years or so in the middle where people regrouped. And the second thing that happened, which is quite extraordinary, I'm still dizzy in my head by it, was the way in which in 1989, when Marxism 1.0 collapsed, it was as if what we were dealing with was a spirit of some kind, because it suddenly morphed away from Russia, where Russia became, well, first of all, became mafia-led. Whatever you think it is under Putin, that's what it is now. But it morphed with this neo-Marxism then flooding into the West within just a matter of 10, 20, 25 years. The sins of Russia have suddenly taken over the West, just as Our Lady said. And I wonder if that's one of the reasons why neo-Marxism attacks the Catholic. So Minnesota's not the Catholic Church, but why neo-Marxism attacks the Catholic Church as its first instinctive hated target. And so I think that's partly why I draw the beginnings of a parallel between Spain in 1936 and Minnesota in 2026. Yeah.
Well, I always had problems with the Spanish Civil War, meaning I was a big Hemingway fan, and I loved.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I love For Whom the Bell Tolls. That was one of my favorite novels. And of course, I'm siding with Hemingway's protagonist in that gang. And that really shaped my view of the war. It was only many years later, I confess, many years later, when I started analyzing it. It was the Republicans and the Nationalists, but the Republicans was Hemingway's character side, that I found out that they had murdered, I think it was called the Red Terror, that they had murdered thousands of nuns, priests, clergy. And I'd seen some photos recently from this, and very, very horrific photos, And that made me re-question history and what I had learned, and what's going on, because there's one, as you said, the similarity we see in all of this, whether you call it cultural Marxism that's overtaken the West or not, is a hatred of the church. It's a hatred of Christianity. There's many, many factors, but one common thing that you will find there is the hatred of Christianity and the desire to destruct Christianity. And if you look at the whether it's Minneapolis storming the church of the Spanish Civil War, if you look at any of that, one common enemy is the church and Christianity. And they're working very hard, whether it's through education, whether it's through laws in the courts, whether it's through burning of churches, that on many fronts to destroy Christianity, and their whether through its diluting theology, through through the woke religion, that is one of their main goals, and it's frightening.
So one of the things that really surprised me, like you, I've been on exactly the same journey. It was astonishing to me that all my heroes were writing from the Republican side, the side that killed the nuns and priests. And you mentioned Hemingway. It was also Laurie Lee and his book Sided with Rosie. It was Orwell. Orwell joined up to fight the Catholic Church, and ended up by being shot at by communists, which is why he then began to reconsider his position, like we are too. And then the Times, the TLS, all the major journals of the West presented this as the forces of democratic enlightenment and the autonomy of the individual against a deep and dark medieval Spanish autocratic Catholicism. Now, I should say that as I started to read my way through the Spanish Civil War, there wasn't a great deal that was good about the Spanish situation. There'd been no reform for 300 years. The landowning classes were moribund. You can see why the propagandists said these were teachers and peasants looking to gain a share of their own land, and they were unable to do it. But what gave it away was, you quite rightly say, was this inexplicable hatred of Catholicism, which meant that they set out to do the things they did. And one of the things that those people who tried to explain the rationale of Franco and the Spanish response was, they were not being proactive as fascists, and Spanish fascism was very different from Italian fascism, which was very different again from German fascism. And we should never use the word fascist without distinguishing, at least in terms of that epoch, which of the three we're talking about, because they're not the same, and to describe them the same is seriously ignorant and misleading. But in fact, what the Spanish were doing, they're saying, well, we're defending ourselves from the Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution was a terrible thing. It produced gulags and death sentences, and we want to defend ourselves from the gulags in Spain, and that's why we're fighting. So that's the picture in Spain is very different. And then we come to where we are today, and it's very interesting the way in which the revolutionary spirit, they attack not only churches but everything that the church stands for. So above all, the family, which is the to have, for a mother and a father to come together, to have children and create community, and then, as Peterson so movingly describes, parents, grandparents, great grandparents. You have a kind of cascading pyramid of a micro community in which all the responsibilities mirror different stages of life. It's a very beautiful and wonderful thing when it works. And the left make it their business, first of all, to stop women becoming mothers, to destroy motherhood, and then to stop people becoming husbands and wives, and the whole alphabet marriage thing is part of that. And then to de-sex humanity. So even if you want to become husbands and wives and have children, by the time you've taken the surgery and the pills, you're de-sexed and you can't. There's an enforced sterility. And you say, well, why is the left making transsexualism the apex of its goal for human change? And the answer is, it's got to be something to do with their hatred of the family and the gift of becoming co-creators with God. So even if they don't describe the Catholic Church as their primary object of hatred, Catholic social teaching is absolutely an object of their primal assault.
I would agree, absolutely. I mean, we have just today or yesterday, J.D. Vance announced that his wife is pregnant with their fourth child, a son, and all over social media, we have people from the left saying, "Why are you doing this? What is wrong with you? What is the purpose of it?" And it's just astounding to see it. Whereas you have other people, "Oh, congratulations, that's great. Great job. Look forward. This is a responsible family. They're going to raise great kids." The leftists are asking, "Why on earth are you doing this?" And I don't know if you've heard this, but in the United States, we have an anagram called DINK, D-I-N-K. And this stands for dual income, no kids.
Oh,
And
yes. Yeah,
yes. And it's
Yeah.
a group of people, mostly rather wealthy white couples
Yeah.
who are making plenty of money, but they refuse to have children. There's even a new one that came up called Dink Wad. It's dual income, no kids with a dog. And so this
I
is
like the
also
suffix wad. Whatever happens, wad can't be a bad thing.
yes. So you have the Dink Wad. And as you said, it's not a obvious assault on the church in Christianity, but it is. It's a very big assault, and that's why if you go around certain areas, you'll see people pushing strollers, and when you peek in to say hello to the baby, there's actually a dog in the stroller, and this is this is very common, you know.
And there's a junior version of that called the Dink Whack, which is dual income, no kids with a cat.
Yes, and those, or with 10 cats at that point. This is what's going on.
The acronym gets too problematic then, but Dink Whack. Yeah, no, you're right, absolutely right. Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing there is, especially you were asking about the United States, there's certain, I was listening to some of these journalists, and they said if they're in certain cities in Texas, even in New York City, they don't need security. These are more of the conservative journalists. But if they go to Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, they said they pay for security. They said this isn't an act. They have to pay for security because those cities have gone so violent, so far left, that you will be attacked. There was just a journalist, a conservative journalist, who was beaten and stabbed in Minneapolis, a YouTube journalist. YouTube journalist. Yeah, and you don't hear this from the other side, as you rightly pointed out.
Yeah. Well, maybe the answer to our original question about churches is that churches also have to have security. You have to pay people who are not part, to professionally protect you.
Well, that would be it would be unfortunate to see that, but you wonder if we're trending in that direction,
Yeah.
And I think next time we meet, one thing we should talk about a little bit, which is a bit off, is we need to talk about Iceland. Excuse me. We need to talk about Greenland. You know why Trump just called it Iceland 5 times during the conference, and now I'm thinking.
No. No, yes. So Iceland thinks it's going to be invaded. Oh no, poor Iceland.
He's in Davos, and he was on stage, and I think he referred it to as Iceland 5 or 6 times. But that's a topic we really should hit upon, because I think that covers a lot of the issues that they're both plaguing Europe and the United States, although it at first doesn't seem that. So I think that would be a great episode to touch on.
Well, I'm sure I'm capable of annoying a whole load of people with my views on Iceland or Greenland or Trump land
with ice.
It'll become Trump land. Yes.
Oh, well, be careful with that. All right.
That could catch on.
All right. Well, it was great to see you, and let's catch up soon. And good luck with the weather there, because I heard here in New York it's going down to 8 degrees. This is Fahrenheit, and I think you might be getting some of the same.
I'm off to go and collect some of my wood that I've kept for the wood burners. Thank you, Justin.
All right. See you soon.
God bless.
God bless.